Hello, welcome to Word of Torah at Nativ. I wanted to talk to you about this week's parsha, Vayeira, and he appeared. But I wanted to focus on a particular character, which is often overlooked, and that is the character of Hagar, the Egyptian maidservant of Sarah, who ends up being the mother of Ishmael. Now, she actually enters the story before the beginning of Vayeira. Vayeira begins in chapter 18, but we see Hagar show up already in chapter 16. Now, I wanted to bring you in here so you can see here. V'Sarai Eshet Avram, and Sarah, wife of Avram, lo yalda lo. She did not give a child to him. V'la shifcha Mitzrit, and she had, or was to her, a slave who was Egyptian. Ushema Hagar, and her name was Hagar. So this is the introduction of Hagar to the story. V'tomer Sarai el Avram, and Sarah says to Abraham, Hine na, behold, please, Atzarani Hashem miledes. So she's saying that Hashem has prevented her from giving birth. Now, this is after God has promised to Abraham that he's going to have a child, and God specified that it'll be a child of his organs, that it'll be from his physical issue. So it's not an adopted child, it's not a philosophical child or a student, it's someone physically from his body. But when giving this message to Abraham, in this case actually Avram, before he gets the extra hay, God didn't specify that it would also be by Sarah. So Sarah is kind of thinking through the problem, saying, look, God's promised you're going to have a child, but he hasn't mentioned me. So she's trying to come up with a workaround. V'tomer Sarai el Avram, hine na, behold, please, atzarani. So this is to have stopped me, Adonai did, miledes, from bearing children. Bo na el shifchasai, come please to my slave. Ulai, maybe, ibaneh mimena, I will, ulai is maybe, ibaneh, I will bear children, mimena, from her. V'yishma Avram, and Abraham listened, lukal Sarai, to the voice of Sarai. So this is the first instance when it comes up. And, Sarah gives her maidservant, her slave, the Egyptian Hagar, to Abraham after 10 years of being in Canaan. And so 10 years after they left Mitzrayim, they left Egypt, he gave her. Now, this is interesting because you see here the English says, and gave her to her husband, Abraham, as a concubine. But what it says in the Hebrew is, V'titain, and she gave Otah, and she gave her La Avram, to Abram, Isha. This isn't actually wife. This is Ish, which is husband, and a feminine hey to say her husband. So Isha in this case is her husband rather than Isha, which is wife. Lo, to him, La Isha, for a wife. Okay, so these look like the same word, Isha and La Isha, but actually it's husband of her and for a wife. These are two different words. So it doesn't actually say concubine, it says for a woman or for a wife. That's where we are in the situation that Abram has a child by Hagar. Okay. But then there's a conflict. And the conflict is that once Hagar has this child, she then starts to see herself as above Sarai. She starts to look down on Sarai. And Sarai starts to resent her. And immediately there's a conflict between these two women. Just like in the case in the future of Yaakov and his two wives, they are put in direct competition with each other. That someone has interfered with the natural course of the marriage, and Jacob has ended up, because of the cause of Lavan, he's ended up with two wives who are now competing to bring children to Yaakov. And in the same way, there's the same difficult feeling. And now, in Vayeira, in chapter 21, which is inside Vayeira, we get this reintroduction of Hagar. V'teireh Sarah, now she is Sarah with a hey, es ben Hagar. She saw, v'teireh, and she saw, the ben of Hagar, the son of Hagar, Mitzri, the Egyptian, Asher Yalda, that she gave birth to, LaAvram, Matzachek. Now you should know that Matzachek, this word which is to play, tzachak, is the same root as is in the case of Yitzchak. So the eventual son of Abraham, see now we have the hey in Abraham as well, Abraham and Sarah will be Yitzchak, and this is the same root. So what the Torah is hinting is, she's seeing that Hagar and her son are playing, but the fact of linking it to the name of Yitzhak is a way of saying that he's sat in the place that she wants her son to take. It's like he's in the role of playing which she wants for Yitzchak. Okay, so then here the resentment grows, right? V'tomer la'Avram, and she said to Abraham, Garesh ha'ama, expel or exile the maidservant, Hazot, this maidservant, V'es bana, and her son, because what's happening here is you have Ben, which is son, and Bana is her son. This feminine hey on the end makes it her son. Ki lo yorash Ben ha'ama, because it will not be that he will inherit the son of the maidservant, Hazot, this one, im bani, with my son. So im with an aleph is if, and im with an ayin is with. So it's with bani. Ben is son, and bani is my son. Im Yitzchak, with Yitzchak. So she doesn't want them to be sat on an even sitting. She considers herself to be the true wife. This is the true son, even though the other one was born first. She's not happy with how it's come about, and she resents it. And she doesn't want them being treated on the equal level. Now this is interesting. Vayeira. So in the case of when she saw, it was Vatera with an aleph, right? Vatera with an aleph. And then next it says Vayeira with an ayin. And ra, of course, is bad or evil or distress. So it's saying Vayeira, and it distressed him, hadavar ma'od, this thing, very much ma'od. But a nay, Avram. So it was very evil. This thing was very evil in the eyes of Avram. Okay. El odos beno, in the condition of his son. Now notice before, Benah was her son. This is Beno, which is his son. And Beni is my son. So what we're doing is we're starting with Ben each time, and the different suffix we put on says who it is. So Beno is his, Benah is hers, and Beni is mine, whether you're male or female. But God says to Abraham, don't be distressed over the boy and the slave. Do what Sarah tells you. Because see, God has the insight. He has the foreshadowing. He knows what's going to happen next. Whatever Sarah tells you, do as she says. For it's through Isaac that your offspring shall be continued for you. So both boys are offspring of Avram, but it's Isaac, the second son, as far as Abraham's concerned, and the first son as far as Sarah's concerned. This is going to be the line that God pursues. V'gam es ben ha'ama legoy, and also es ben ha'ama, the son of the slave, legoy, for a nation, asi menu, I will I will establish him as a nation, ki zerakahu, because he is your seed. So don't worry, I am going to continue the holy line through Yitzhak, but I will also bless Yishmael because he's your son. So I'm not exiling him or abandoning him. I'm still going to be with Yishmael. He's still going to become great, but he won't be the line through which I have promised you all the blessings in the land and all these kind of things. So he's also important, but he's not the main focus of this story that we are pursuing. So next morning, he takes bread and a skin of water, and gave them to Hagar, and he placed them on her shoulder together with the child, and he sent her away. So the child is at least 13 at this point. That's my understanding. And she wandered about in the wilderness of Beersheba. Now, this is the thing that really kind of jumps out to me. So she runs out of water. V'yikalu. So this is kal is like all, and it's basically to complete or to finish. Klu hamayim. So the waters were finished, right? Min ha chemes, right? So from the skin, from the water skin, v'tashlech, right? So shalach is to send. Es hayeled, her son, the boy really. Techas, underneath echad, one ha-sichim. Now, this is interesting because siach can mean a couple of different things. It can mean a bush, so she's hidden him under one of the bushes, right? But also it can mean to meditate or to complain. So she's putting him under the meditation of complaint, under the mournful thought, under the mourning. So it's both things. It's a little pun there from the Torah. And she goes away a little distance. It goes to say a bow shot away. Here's the word keshes. Now this is interesting because it's a foreshadowing that he will be a man of the desert and he will become strong with a bow. But it also, it can't be ignored that this is like a keshes anani, which is like a bow in the sky. After the flood, after the disaster of the flood, God promised us that everything was going to be okay by putting his bow in the sky. So this is starting to just hint poetically to the connection that things look like disaster right now. It looks like you're going to die in the desert. You don't have any water. Your hope is gone. You think it's all over, but here comes a little bit of hope. Here comes the keshes of what's going to happen. Okay. So keshes ki amra, because she said, al ere. Now, this al is not on, which is with an ayin, or el, which is with a segol. This is al, which is to say no, or the opposite, or the negate. So whatever happens next, it will be the opposite of that. So re is to see. Ere is I will see, and al ere is I will not see. I don't want it to be that I see, right? Bamos, with the death, hayaled, of the boy. Vatashave, and she sat mineged, against, vatisa es kola vatevch. Okay. So basically what this is saying is she sat and she, tisa, she rose, es kola, her voice, and she just wept. She's just completely distraught. There's the end of her hope, right? So what's going to happen next? This is a woman who was brought out of Mitzrayim as a slave, and she went into the house of these great people, Avram and Sarah, and there she had a hard time. She was told, you're going to have a kid with this guy, so she has a kid with the guy like she was told. Then she finds joy in her child, which is a natural thing to do. She's playing with a child. And her mistress, who set her up with this child in the first place, resents her and treats her badly, so much so that she runs away. Okay? She suffers and she runs away. So we can really empathize with Hagar right now, right? She goes off into the desert and she even runs out of water, and now she thinks she's going to watch her son die, and she just goes off away from her son and sits down and she just weeps. She's just completely, in ruin. So what happens next? V'yishma Elohim es kol hana'ar. Now this is already counterintuitive, because this is the kol, this is the voice, and this is v'yishma Elohim, and God heard es kol. So we're thinking he hears the voice. Whose voice are we thinking of? We're thinking it's Hagar, because she's in the desert, she's weeping. But it doesn't say that. It says v'yishma Elohim es kol hana'ar, of the young man, of the youth. God hears the voice of the youth. V'yikra malach Elohim, and called did the angel or the messenger of God, El Hagar. So the messenger of God calls to Hagar, right? Min Hashemayim, from the heaven. V'yomer la, and it says to her, Malach, Hagar, which literally means, what are you going, Hagar? Like, where are you going? What are you up to? What are you doing? Where are you going? Al tiri. So yara is to be afraid. Yud resh aleph is to be afraid. And tire is you will be afraid. And this is al tire, you will not be afraid. And the yod on the end is me. So don't be afraid of me. Ki, because Shema Elohim, God heard El Kol, to the voice Hana'ar, Ba'asher Hu Sham. Okay. So Ba'asher, with that Hu Sham, that he is there. So don't you be afraid, because God has heard the voice of your child. Now, it's interesting that is the comfort to Hagar. This implies the thing that she needs to be comforted isn't that God hears her voice, but that God hears the voice of her child, because that's what she's really worried about. She's an Egyptian. She knows the desert. She could probably find something to make her survive, and she's a grown woman, so she could probably just about make it out, but her son is young and vulnerable, and she can't give him what he needs. So really, this is saying that if the angel is talking to her and saying, comforting her about the case of her son, clearly this is who she's worried about. Okay. Kumi, see. So kum is to rise or to raise. Kumi, see. So it's like saying, raise up es hana'ar, raise up the youth. V'hachaziki, and so it's to strengthen es yadech, and strengthen your hand. What does this mean? Lift up the boy and strengthen your hand? Because really the tragedy and the sadness and the brokenheartedness has weakened her. She's collapsed. She's burst into tears. She's sat on the ground. She can't even stand. But he's saying, no, raise up the boy and strengthen es yadech. So yad is hand. Yadech is your hand, yours feminine. Your hand masculine would be yodcha. My hand would be yadi. And your hand feminine is yadech. So strengthen your yadech, your hand. Bo, ki. So it says bo here is not bo like come. It's bet vav, not bet aleph, but bet vav, which is with him. So strengthen your hand with him. Become strong with him. Strengthen your hand. Ki goy gadol, because a great nation, asimenu. Now this is what God said to Abraham. I'm going to make the boy into a great nation. Now the angel of God is telling this to Hagar. I'm going to make your kid into a great nation. And then we have this word here. Vayifkach. Vayifkach. Now, patach with a taf is to open, right? Or an opening. But with one letter difference, this is still to say to open, but fakach is more about, or pakach is more about opening specifically eyes and ears. It's a strange thing that this is almost like has a two-letter subroot which connects patach and pakach. So v'yifkach Elohim es eineha. So ayin is an eye. Eineha is her eyes. The feminine hay on the end being the hers. So and God opened her eyes. V'teira, and she saw be'er mayim, a well of water. V'teilech, and she went. V'tamalei, vatmalei, which is to fill up. She filled up. Es hachemes. Es hachemes is the skin, the water skin, mayim. So she filled up the skin with water. V'tashk es hana'ar. Now this is the word that I associate with Hagar, because in the story of Hagar, this particular verb comes up a great deal. And it comes up at very poignant moments. And I really want you to look out when you look into the stories around, anytime it comes to do with Hagar and Ishmael, look for this verb here. which is to water or to irrigate, to give drink, to irrigate, drink, water, cause to water, water, irrigate, water, and give water to. You also see this in the story of Rivka. You also see it in the story of Rachel. And this idea of who gives water to who is always a sign of kindness. It's always a sign of meeting the needs of someone vulnerable. It's always the idea. And when God interacts with Yisrael, it often talks about the rains will come and God will give you the water you need. And when the servant of Abraham is looking for a wife for Abraham's son, the servant looks for kindness, and he uses the idea of giving water as a symbol of kindness. And then in the next generation, when Jacob goes and tries to, Isaac's son, goes to find a wife, the sign of kindness that makes him fall in love with Rachel, with Rachel, is the fact that she comes and brings water, right? So the giving of water, particularly tashach, is the symbol of kindness, mercy, and recognizing the vulnerability of someone else. And God was with the boy as he grew up, and he dwelt in the wilderness, and he became skilled with a bow. You see this word, skilled with a kashes, which is just like the kashes, the rainbow in the sky at the end of the story of Noach. This is the idea that when faced with cataclysmic hopelessness, there will be this sign of a bow that will, tell you that everything's going to be okay, and that you can trust in God. And so I find that story just to be very gray. But what I mean, it's not black and white. This is a very complicated story, and it requires a lot of siach. It requires a lot of meditation. And I want to challenge you to investigate that story and find out everything you can, to look into the midrash, look into the commentaries, go and ask whoever you know that's the most expert in this story, go and ask your rabbi, find out what is going on with Hagar. Because I'm very interested in the easy stories are the one where there's a goodie and there's a baddie, and someone does everything right and someone does everything wrong, and that's very easy for us. But the biggest challenges in the Torah is when something is very complicated and someone good might do something that makes us uncomfortable, or someone who we classically think of as being bad does something very good, or someone who is external or other, they don't get treated right. And we have an obligation to treat the stranger well. We have an obligation to water the thirsty and to protect the vulnerable, and not to change the agreement on people. And this is a very uncomfortable story, because not only are we looking at the vulnerability of this mother and child, but we're also looking at the vulnerability of this mother and child, both at the hands of our patriarch and our matriarch, and also at the hands of God. Because when she runs away, an angel comes back and says, go back to Sarah. And that's a shock, because we know that the line is going to continue under Isaac. So why should Hagar and Ishmael go back to Sarah? In fact, it goes and says, humble yourself under the hand of Sarah, and I will make you into a great nation through your son. In fact, the promise comes that this son will be the father of 12 tribes. Just like Yitzhak, Ishmael also will be the father of 12 tribes. So why? Does the angel force Hagar to go back, or does the angel give Hagar a choice? The angel tells Hagar, go back and humble yourself under Sarah's hand. He doesn't send troops to collect her from the desert and drag her back and humble her. He invites her to humble herself under the hand of Sarah. And in being humbled, in being made into a slave, what comes forth from this, from being humbled and being made into a slave? Her offspring gets made into a great nation. Who else had this story? Well, the Jewish people were humbled under the Mitzrayim. They were made into slaves in Egypt. And they were elevated into 12 tribes and made into a great nation. So there is this reciprocal thing happening. It's not a coincidence that Hagar is a Mitzrite, that she is from Mitzrayim. So in the one case, you have the Israelites being humbled and made into slaves in Egypt. And in the other case, you have an Egyptian being humbled and made into a slave in the house of Israel. And by being humbled in this process, their offspring become 12 great nations, 12 great tribes, which makes a great nation. And they go on to prosper under the hand of God. Now, I think that's enough of a question to give us pause. And I challenge you to find out everything that you can about Hagar, her context, her story, and the result of her child. And maybe it teaches us just a little about our own tribe, about our own nation, and about the purpose of the Jewish people under the hand of God. Thank you very much for your time.